nerds! Let's talk some books, shall we? Welcome to my channel, Jacqueline Discovers Books. I'm on a quest to read 100 books in 2021. So far I've read 69 books, and of course during that time some of them have become absolute favorites and some not so much. So today I'm going to talk to you about some of my favorites and some of the books that I felt were flops. So I keep track of my books that I read on Goodreads and Storygraph. There's pros and cons to both, which I'll probably have to do a whole nother video about. But when I was looking at what I've read so far this year, I have exactly 7 5-star books and 7 2-star books. So today we're going to talk about the 7 5-star and 7 2-star. Now I don't have any 1-star books, and that's because if I don't finish a book, I feel like that's kind of 1-star status, but I don't feel comfortable giving a rating to a book that I didn't finish. So I have 0 1-star books, but there's plenty of books I hated, just didn't even finish them. So, but you know, there are books out there that they have slow beginnings that if I had stuck to them I might have loved them, so I don't rate those books. Sorry for the long explanation about that. Okay, so let's start with the flops so that we can end on a positive note at the end. Okay, so starting with number 7, it is The 12 Rules of Life, An Antidote to Chaos by Jordan Peterson. Now, Jordan Peterson has become a little bit infamous over the last couple of years because he had some commentary online about the use of pronouns in his classroom. So I definitely think that he is, I don't want to say problematic, but you know, there are some issues that I don't agree with him on, but he also has a lot of material online that is, I think, really useful for people, and I have enjoyed some of his videos online. So I picked this book up because of that. And I gave it 2 stars because it's just very, very long-winded. Every chapter is a rule, and by the end of the chapter you have absolutely no idea what he's talking about anymore. You don't remember what the rule is. What are we talking about? It was just too long-winded, and it took out the lessons and really just made me want to not finish the book. I somehow trudged through the whole thing, and it's a pretty big book, but it's one that I unfortunately would not recommend to anyone. So the next one, number 6, is Women Who Run with Wolves by Clarissa Estes. And full disclosure, I didn't actually finish this book. I didn't realize that because the book I had been reading online was short. It was very short. And then I learned later that I realized later that it's actually quite a very long book, and the thing that I had read must have been some abridged version of the original. So does it count that I finished this book? Does in my book. Does when I'm counting my books. So I gave this one 2 stars, and I wrote in Goodreads, a few interesting tales mixed in with a lot of boring talking about the tales. And that pretty much sums that up. It's a book about the wild woman trope. I'm super interested in that. That sounds interesting, and definitely was looking forward to this book, but again, kind of just long-winded and fell flat for me. Don't recommend. The next book is The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. This book is interesting. So every chapter talks about a different law of power, and then it tells stories, you know, from history using that law of power. And I definitely understand the whole concept of understanding your enemies, you know, beating people at their own game, that kind of thing. But this just kind of felt amoral, wrong, and I just walked away not really loving that. So what did I write? I wrote, I understand the concept of learning the moves of your enemies in order to beat them at their own game. And I went into reading this with that intention, albeit lightheartedly. Maybe it would help me understand workplace politics better. I ended up just kind of being bored. There you have it, folks. All right, number 4. I don't even want to say it. Number 4 is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Now, Viktor Frankl wrote this book. It's a philosophical book. Well, it's actually 2 parts. So the first part talks about his time during the Holocaust in a concentration camp and his time there and his experience. And then the second half talks about his philosophy of life that he created based on his experiences. So I am an INFJ, if you're familiar with the Myers-Briggs personality test, and every list always says INFJs are going to love this book. So that's the reason I picked it up. And I do feel like a huge asshole for not liking this book. I have a lot of respect for Viktor Frankl and for what he went through and his experiences. But I also feel that his philosophies that he was sharing in the second half of the book were just very simplistic, and life is more complicated than the things he was saying. For example, he was talking about some examples that in my mind were just kind of too good to be true. He seemed to cast judgment on some of the people in the camps who were suicidal. And he explained away things like addiction as just a lack of having meaning in your life. And I just think people's problems are more complicated than that. So this book ended up a 2-star for all of those reasons. All right, number 3. Another one I'm ashamed to say, but it's Astrophysics for People in a Hurry by Degrasse Tyson. I was really excited to learn about astrophysics from, a layman's point of view, just simple basics, walk away learning something and feeling like you have a general knowledge of it. And I walked away from this book feeling dumber than I started. It was just, the pacing was too fast. It just zoomed through, and then you're done, and then you think, what did I just read? Did I learn anything from this? And you know what, honestly, maybe it's just me, maybe I'm just too dumb for this book, which is entirely possible. The next book, number 2, I have a lot of opinions about this book. Number 2 is The 4-Hour Work Week by Timothy Ferriss. Where to start? This book is completely unrealistic. This book is an unrealistic viewpoint from a very elitist person. He's giving advice on how to be more simplistic in your time, and that's what I thought the whole book was about. But really, it's about start a business online and just press play and walk around living your life while this thing makes you money. And some of his ideas were buy cheap crap from other countries and then slap your own labels on them and sell them online, or pay for an assistant in India for to be your personal assistant to do half of your job tasks for you, even if you're working for a boss. They'll never find out. Only answer your emails twice a day at certain set times. If people need to reach you, they'll learn, the boundaries you've set for yourself. On what planet? Not where I work. So, and now we're on book number 1 for the flops category. Number 1 flop of 2021, and that's Coraline by Neil Gaiman. And I know a lot of you like this book, like Neil Gaiman, like the movie, and to that I say, I'm sorry. You're wrong. I mean, this is a horror book for children. Do I even need to say anything else? I mean, it was creepy, it was weird. If you don't already know, it's a story about a little girl who moves into a new flat with her family, and it has many doors, and this one door in particular takes her down into what she thinks is her apartment again. But everything is not as it seems there. Her mother has button eyes and is creepy and wants her to stay with her, and she has to save the other souls that are trapped there, and oh no, just no. That's a no for me. So that is the last of my 7 flops for 2021. Ironically, or interestingly, 6 of the 7 flops were nonfiction. And I'm reading more nonfiction right now so far this year than fiction. I would say about 60 to 70% have been nonfiction. So it's interesting that a lot of, almost all of my flops were nonfiction. Just interesting to note. Okay, now on to the more fun part, which is the favorites. I have 7 books that I am just in love with and I'm so excited to talk about, and honestly has made this whole challenge worth it. So I'm going to start with number 7, which is If I Had My Life to Live Over, I Would Pick More Daisies. Now it says this is by Sandra Martz, but this is really an anthology of short stories, poetry, there's photography in here, and the theme is making choices as a woman. And it's interesting because the beginning of the book is geared towards making choices as a young person, and the end of the book is about making choices as an older woman. So it's just very interesting. It's an old book. I'll show you. I have it here. Interesting picture on the front. If I had my life to live over, I'd pick more daisies. And I got this book at just a very cool little old bookstore. Let me see if I can show you some cool photographs that are in here. Let's see. Just pictures of women in different phases of their life. It's got that crinkly cover that old books sometimes have. This definitely used to be like an old library book or something. And I loved it. Anyways, I want to read to you the title poem. It's called If I Had My Life to Live Over by Nadine Stair. I'd dare to make more mistakes next time. I'd relax. I would limber up. I would be sillier than I have been this trip. I would take fewer things seriously. I would take more chances. I would climb more mountains and swim more rivers. I would eat more ice cream and less beans. I would perhaps have more actual troubles, but I'd have fewer imaginary ones. You see, I'm one of those people who live sensibly and sanely, hour after hour, day after day. Oh, I've had my moments, and if I had to do it over again, I'd have more of them. In fact, I'd try to have nothing else, just moments one after another, instead of living so many years ahead of each day. I've been one of those persons who never goes anywhere without a thermometer, a hot water bottle, a raincoat, and a parachute. If I had to do it again, I would travel lighter than I have. If I had my life to live over, I would start barefoot earlier in the spring and stay that way later in the fall. I would go to more dances. I would ride more merry-go-rounds. I would pick more daisies. Come on, y'all. So good. So this was my first 5-star book of the whole year. It's just a random find. Now, okay, this book, I don't even know what year it came out. Let me see if I can find it. But there's stories in here that are a little outdated, a little cringeworthy, but 1982. 1992, but there's some stories in here that were from the 80s. So, recommend if you can find this online. Highly recommend it. Especially if you like short stories and poetry. I love an anthology with both. Okay, number 6. Don't worry, it only goes up from here. Okay, so, number 6. If you had told me in 2020 that I would ever read a comic book, like a whole book, on purpose, for fun, because I wanted to, I would say, you're crazy. But then one of my best friends recommended a book called Adulthood is a Myth by Sarah Anderson. And I laughed on every single page. I loved it. I flew through it. And it's just fun. It was so fun and relatable and cute and so enjoyable. And so I had to give it 5 stars. Now I've read the second book because there's several more in the series, and they're cute too, but the first one is just like the gem. It's, if you're in your 20s or 30s, you don't quite have your life together. I don't allow myself to think that in my 40s or 50s I won't still have my life together, okay? So you're excluded, but 20s and 30s, you're allowed to not have your life together, and you will relate to this comic. Okay, number 5. Ooh, okay, 84 Charing Cross Road, or Charing Cross Road. Don't know how to pronounce it. By Helene Hanff? I don't know how to pronounce anyone's names either. So I actually heard about this book on Noelle Gallagher's page, and she talked so glowingly about it, and I had never heard of it before, so I had to look it up. And it's a correspondence through letters between 2 people, an American woman and a man over in England who runs a bookshop. And it is just adorable. It is adorable. I wrote, it's a darling little book. Before reading, I thought the premise seemed a little bit boring because it is just a woman writing a man letters about requesting books. And I thought, okay. But I'm nosy enough to want to see what goes on in people's private correspondence, so I gave it a try, and that's absolutely true. Give me a diary, give me some books of letters, I will read them. I'm so intrigued. I fell in love with everyone and everything about this book. I found myself laughing continuously at Helene's wit, especially set against Frank's, well, Britishness. She's so lighthearted and fun and witty and just full of life, and Frank is just dry, and so I like that juxtaposition between the 2 of them. Juxtaposition. I like that difference between them. At first I kept yelling at Helene because don't you realize that they are being nice to you because you are a customer and you are buying them food that they don't have, that they can't get while they're on rations. I hate it when people feel like someone is their friend when in reality they're just paying them for something. However, over time you feel a sense of love and respect growing between parties, and I love how naturally everyone else at the store and their families seem to get involved. Tears were shed at the end. So at first it is just between Helene and Frank, but then just very naturally other people from the store and family members and everyone's getting involved, and it's just really sweet. A sweet, feel-good story. Okay, so what number are we on? Number 4. This was my uncle's favorite book. This was his suggestion, and I was like, oh, okay. Wasn't that into it. But I read it, and now it's one of my favorite books. How did that happen? It's called 41, A Portrait of My Father by George W. Bush. So this is a book written by Bush Jr. About his father. And it starts off so interesting because he talks about the reason why he's even writing the book, which became the reason I really was enthralled by it. The daughter of David McCullough, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but the famous author who wrote the James Adams biography, he was talking to his daughter and told her that one of his wishes and regrets is that James Adams' son did not also write a book about his own father, because he was a president also. So she's sharing this with Bush Jr. and saying, you know, you're the only other guy who's been the son of a president and a president. Like, heed my father's words and write a book from your perspective about your father. So he does that, and he sits down to write this biography about his dad, and he writes it, and he says that it is a love letter to his dad. And that setup alone just had me. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm into it. And from there, you just fall in love with this man. You do, and take politics out of it, like, completely. You just really get to know him as a person, as a man, as a father, as a husband, and you just grow in a lot of respect for him. And he's just a person with a lot of character and a lot of integrity, and, you know, people like that don't exist anymore. And so he just really spent his life wanting to serve and be there for his family. And so you have to admire that. Anyways, I wept like a baby at the end of this book. It was just, I was not expecting that. I didn't even think I was going to like it at all, let alone love it. So there you go. All right, number 3 is the Rosie Project. I don't know how to say this name. Graham Simpson. This was adorable. This is a contemporary romance about a man named Don Tillman, who is one of my favorite characters of all time. I believe he's autistic. He has everything set a certain way. He's like very OCD. He has his schedule for his meals. He's very regimented. He lives his life with the rules and with a schedule, and he decides to do this thing called the Wife Project, where he's going to find a wife based on, you know, the survey he creates. And of course, you know, no one can meet his requirements because they're crazy. And so this woman he meets named Rosie, who of course doesn't pass any of the tests because she's a nightmare of a person. And I don't say that like she's a bad person. I say that as like she's just a bit of a hot mess. Anyway, so I don't want to spoil it, but let me just say it's adorable, and I just giggled my way through the entire book. Just giggled. So cute. I think you can probably put 2 and 2 together about how that works out. The man who regimented and has his life a certain way, and the hot mess express woman comes in and it's a totally bad fit for him, and they work on a project together, and what's gonna happen? Okay, number 2. We're down to my 2 favoriteest books of the year so far. The Book of Longings by Sue Monk Kidd. So she is the author who wrote The Secret Life of Bees, which I've actually never read, but I saw the movie and I really liked it. And she's written a couple other things that people really like. And so if you don't know about this book, the premise might sound intriguing or really weird to you. So the story takes place in the time of Jesus' time, and The book starts with, I am Anna. I was the wife of Jesus. What? So, okay, for those of you of faith who might be afraid that this is a little sacrilegious, here's my explanation for why it's not. The Bible does not say that Jesus has a wife, but he also doesn't, talk about not having a wife. And the way Sue Monk Kidd, I guess, explained this in an interview was, if he lived his life like a typical Jewish man of the time, like he did in every other aspect, he lived his life very traditionally, then one of the things he would have been expected to do as a 30-something-year-old Jewish man is to be married. It would have actually been weird if he wasn't married. So that's explanation enough for me. Keep in mind that this story is completely fictional, and it's also it doesn't get weird. Like there's not a sex scene or anything like that. Well, there is, but it's very, how do I say? It's just very vague. It's not going to get into anything weird. So if you are someone of faith that thinks I'm going to avoid that book because it's sacrilegious, I really would say go into it with the spirit of understanding that this is fiction, it's a what if, and it's really not about him, it's more about Anna and about women in that time, and this extraordinary woman who, it's called the Book of Longings because she has a lot of longings to be independent, to be a writer, to have a voice, and women in that time did not have a voice. So also this book has a character named Yalfa, I think is how you say it, and she's the aunt of Anna, and she's my favorite character of the year so far, at least top 3 favorite characters of the year. Spunky, independent, very cool. Alright, so we are on number 1 for our faves for 2021, and if you've made it this far, you're a saint. I'm tired. Can't wait to take my contacts out. So, book number 1 is The Last Blue, and it is a book about a woman named Jubilee who is a blue person of Kentucky, which I didn't know anything about this book before I read it, but apparently the characters in the story are based on the true people who were called the Blue People of Kentucky, and they had a blood disease that was passed down from generation to generation, and it made their skin look blue. So the story is about a girl named Jubilee who is one of the last blues known in Kentucky. And this story has everything. It has romance, it has mystery and adventure, and it just has a little bit of everything in it. So if you like historical fiction, if you like books based out of Appalachia, if you like historical romance, if you like action and murder, this book's for you. So thank you again for everyone who made it this far into the video, and I appreciate it, and I hope to see you all soon.